afternoon, everyone, and welcome to What the Why with Barbara Ann. If you haven't seen us before, our show features conversations with diverse leaders from all walks of life about why they do what they do and how they figured things out. Maybe you're sick and tired of feeling sick and tired, or you feel stuck and you want to get unstuck in your business, job, or life. All of our guests have something in common with you. At some point in their lives, they felt similarly, and today is no exception. Please join me in welcoming back Cynthia Adinig to our show. Cynthia is 38 years old and developed long COVID in March 2020, which is actually the same time that I developed it. In her case, it resulted in multiple hospitalizations for starvation, life-threatening illnesses, and visits to emergency rooms over 30 times. After being threatened with arrest. Let me repeat that. After being threatened with arrest by hospital staff for seeking medical help during an episode of dangerously low oxygen and high heart rate, she became a patient advocate. Cynthia has gained significant recognition within the patient advocacy community, particularly for her hands-on support to patients during their recovery process. Her assistance ranges from directing patients towards job accommodations and financial resources to empowering them to embark on their own path of patient advocacy in research, legislation, or media. Cynthia has been featured in multiple national news outlets and media sources, including Time Magazine, Bloomberg, USA Today, NBC, and more. More recently and importantly, Cynthia is the co-founder of the BIPOC, which stands for Black, Indigenous, People of Color, for those that don't know what BIPOC means. She's the co-founder of the BIPOC Equity Agency, a multidisciplinary consulting agency led by women of color with disabilities who have long COVID. BIPOC Equity Agency specializes in promoting equity in research and healthcare, and it strives to address disparities in a variety of fields concerning individuals from marginalized communities. Cynthia serves on the board of directors of Solve ME and the Core Lived Experience Advisory Board at Mount Sinai Hospital. She's also a long COVID patient expert trained in research review. She's spoken alongside representatives at NIH, the National Institute of Health, the FDA, and various other agency directors in Health and Human Services. She contributed to the development of legislative language for the COVID-19 Long Haulers Act and provided valuable input on numerous other pieces of long COVID legislation. She's given sworn testimony on Capitol Hill as a patient advocate at a coronavirus committee meeting. She's authored comprehensive guides on medical care for patients. Additionally, she works with various research teams internationally to address issues of disability access and the socioeconomic challenges faced by a diverse group of patients and caregivers. Her experience prior to contracting long COVID involved working as a marketing specialist for minority and women-led organizations, as well as on political campaigns. Suffice to say, I'm super excited to have Cynthia back to our show. She was a guest in season 1, and what a year it's been. So without further ado, please welcome Cynthia to our show. So round of applause. Yay!
Thanks for having me. I'm glad I made my promise and came back.
Me too.
And quite an interesting year. A lot has happened since last time.
It sure has. And for those who haven't seen your previous appearance, and I encourage you to go and look at season 1 and pull up the on-demand episode. But for those who haven't seen it, all of our guests are always asked, what do you want to be when you grow up, right? So let's start with Cynthia. What did you want to be when you grew up?
When I was younger, I wanted to do work in environmental sciences, but art was also like tugging at me. And I always felt like I had to compromise. Now I know I could have done both. And so it's almost no surprise that after starting my marketing company and doing work in graphic design, that I'm now gravitating so heavily in the research space where I can get both of what I love. It's actually fantastic because I get to make like ads and do all sorts of things for science. So it's like the blend of what I always wanted to do, but also growing up experiencing a lot of racism. On a variety of ways, it's great to be able to do this work as well with what I always wanted to do. So I'm really living my dream right now.
Awesome. Which was the perfect segue to the how did you get to here? But that what you just described is just a small piece, because while you're living your dream, how you got here in of itself, I touched on bits of it, but both of us, we were part of that first wave of people who no one even believed there was such a thing at the time as long COVID. So how did that journey bring you to the point that you are now in terms of leading the nation and on an international level efforts to speak out and educate and champion the rights of people who have contracted long COVID?
Yeah, that is a fantastic question. I thought when I first got sick, well, first of all, I didn't know what was wrong with me. I literally woke up one day, couldn't eat any food without a reaction, which is a nightmare for a foodie like myself, especially. If you can't eat, you know you're going to die, period. There's no getting around that. And so I soon, lost my ability to walk, could barely speak in sentences, still struggle with remembering my address some days. And so I really was terrified that everything that I wanted to do and all of my dreams were flushed down the toilet because of this illness, and that I was going to die and not know what was ever wrong with me. Some pivotal moments that made me live and become in this space was losing my sister several years ago to the mental health struggles of renal failure. And in those days when I was in the hospital dying of starvation, no doctor could tell me what was wrong with me. Most of them didn't believe anything was actually wrong with me. At the time, I promised myself before I went and got my upper endoscopy, and then my sister, if I lived, then I would do this work to find her out, not just what's wrong with me, but to make sure others didn't suffer the way that I did alone, and be really cognizant, really proactive about tackling this difficult mental health journey of becoming chronically ill, especially what felt like overnight, and helping people through not just the medical journey, but that mental aspect of feeling like they've lost all purpose and all hope for the future. And so that's also why I created Lifeline Equity Agency, because it's a way that all my friends who are now disabled and others who are disabled to now have an avenue to go and try to get back to what they love, but in a different way that doesn't harm them and their health, that really gives them that grace. So when they're having a hard day, they don't have to show up on that project. No one's going to yell at them or fire them. It's expected. That's built in. That cushion is there. And I really want to show that this is able to be done on a wide scale. That you can employ people with disabilities with chronic illnesses in a way that doesn't harm them, and in a way that they can have that joy of their purpose.
Amen. And that has become a big topic of debate. Even this morning when I was on a call where we were talking about hidden disabilities and long COVID as part of that, and how that affects the employment. And I want to come back to that, but I also want to, before we delve into that piece, because that is huge, you went through it. And in some ways, you're here in spite of. You are here both because of, but also in some ways in spite of medical treatment, quote unquote, that you received. It's interesting that, before the pandemic, most people didn't know what the term gaslighting meant. Most people didn't understand that there were inequities in healthcare. And the pandemic shined a spotlight on everything that's broken with our system. And you nearly died. And to the extent that you're comfortable talking about that, I think our audience needs to understand what was going on and is still going on as it relates to how some patients are treated differently when they go to the emergency room.
Yeah, it hurt me a lot when I came into this space and started meeting people who had chronic illness, especially invisible chronic illness pre-COVID. The stories that they were telling me was basically status quo forever. And it made me so sad that they had to experience this in silence when no one cared. No one was doing media interviews with them, and they were experiencing the exact same thing or worse. And though they tried, the government agencies were not taking them seriously when it comes to asking for these changes, when it came to asking for research, when it came for asking for physician education that was going unfunded, still does, underfunded currently. Yeah, it really broke my heart that they had to go through this struggle, especially pre-social media. I still don't know how they live. They're writing letters to each other to try to figure out their symptoms through letters. It's just wild to me what that in America that was the norm, and even today, it hurts me as I talk to some of the long-term ones that's experienced this for decades, where they've kind of settled into this is the status quo. And like all the fight has been sucked out of them because they tried and tried and tried so long and got nothing and nothing and nothing, or empty promises. And so now that we have all these new people by the millions with chronic illness, and a lot of us have some fight in us, so we are not accepting that the ERs are going to keep trying to kill us. We're not accepting that physicians are going to stay uneducated. We are not accepting the gaslighting and the racism. We're not accepting that there's no metrics to count this even occurrence, especially forward facing at all. No. And so we are, even in and out of the hospital, it doesn't matter. I could have 2 IVs in my arms right now, and I promise you I would fight just as hard in that hospital, be it by my phone or my laptop, to make sure we push this forward. If I have anything to do with my last breath, I will keep fighting, because it's not okay for others and other illnesses to have this be the status quo, and that they're terrified to go to the ER. That's crazy unacceptable in the United States especially.
It really is. And believe it or not, it's already time for our mid-show commercial break. So we're going to take a little brief break for our sponsors, and then we're going to come back for more of this important conversation with Cynthia, and also her efforts to change the world through the BIPOC Equity Agency. Welcome back to What the Why with Barbara Ann and today's very important guest, Cynthia Adinig, and the conversation that we're having about long COVID and what she and others are doing as she leads the charge to advocate on behalf of patients who are not necessarily able to advocate for themselves. And you know, as we were going into the break, we were talking about how so many of us dealt with things in hospitals and from physicians, and they didn't know what they didn't know, and it was a panic, but it doesn't change how it affected us. You know, in my case, one of my doctors actually said, "I'm just going to give you antidepressives." Another doctor said, "I refuse to classify the asthma that you've developed as COVID related because you don't have an active infection." And another guy who was a doctor at an ER refused to admit me in spite of my not so happy hypoxia, because I couldn't possibly have COVID because his brother had COVID, and his brother was very different than what I was. And a lot of us have stories like that, and yours was even more severe. So if you want to talk a little bit about what was kind of the breaking point for you in terms of why you were like, okay, enough is enough.
Yeah, so the breaking point for me was that moment in 2020 when I went to the hospital. It had been several hospital visits at that time, and I had the pulse oximeter that was showing me that my oxygen was dropping at home, and that it was at dangerous levels that I saw on looking online, that it was a dangerous level. Then my heart rate was going crazy. It was like 125, and I'm just sitting there. It was happening during the day, and it was getting nighttime, and I was terrified that I was going to asphyxiate or die in my sleep from that happening. And what was really scary is I couldn't feel it happening. So I would just sit there, and if I didn't have that on me monitoring me, I wouldn't even known that my oxygen was in dangerous levels. So I did what any normal person would do, which is go to the emergency room. And so when I went there, they were generally decent until one of the nurses who had seen me in and out there realized that I was there. And then she came and they had originally agreed to monitor me. And then she came and said, no, get out right now. And I was like, what are you talking about? Why would I get out? And sadly, I had even filmed my oxygen dropping at home because I had a feeling that they weren't going to believe me. And so I was showing, I was like, hey, like, I can actually show you on film where my oxygen was dropping. If you just hook me up to the monitors, you can see. But then she called security, had me escorted out by security, said if I didn't go willingly with security, she was going to call the police. And that's when I was like, this is crazy. I have to film this. No one's going to believe that this is happening. I don't care what the hospital rules are about filming. I have to, for my own safety and well-being, film this because I know how comfortable they were doing this made me realize that this wasn't just a me thing. Like, this is something that was a problem. And so it was really disheartening and hurtful. And scary for that to happen because I didn't know I was going to die that night. I had no idea. Thankfully I didn't. I did end up doing a sleep study that showed that I was indeed not breathing in my sleep multiple times. And it's not something that, CPAP can fix, unlike other, other illnesses. I know. And then so fast forward, unfortunately, until about 2 weeks ago when the Canadian fires happened. And I started having these episodes in my sleep where I'm waking up and I'm coughing and I am gasping for air and I feel like my throat's closing and my heart is racing. And it was extremely terrifying. And I have to just grab my medicine right away. I usually take a Benadryl and a prednisone to try to bring down the reaction. Thankfully, that was seeming to help a little bit. But then I was happening again, like in an hour, and then again in another hour. And it was like this weird loop. And I never knew what was going to happen. It was terrifying. I was scared I was going to asphyxiate. And so I ended up going to the ER. And unfortunately, even though I am now diagnosed with mast cell activation syndrome, which makes me scientifically more prone to having these reactions. And I'm diagnosed with POTS, post-traumatic tachycardia syndrome, which makes it more increased the rate for me to have these reactions. And I'm diagnosed with something called environmental intolerance or multi-chemical sensitivity, which again, scientifically known to make you sensitive to the air quality. And it was a red air quality alert date for the state. And people were being told to come in if you're having bad symptoms. And so I went in like I was supposed to. And unfortunately, after the doctor gave me a medication that I reacted to, even though I had told the doctor that there's a chance I could react to the medication, and I did have an adverse allergic reaction to it, the doctor became hostile and had me escorted out by security again. And even though I said, hey, this is a red air quality alert, you've treated me in the past for reacting to air before and reacting, and that was good air quality, and I have this illness documented. It's very dangerous even for me to sit in your emergency room lobby because of how sensitive I am to the smell of chemicals and how sensitive I am to the air. And I had to ride by ambulance because I knew I couldn't make that 4-minute ride there in a car without dying in the air quality. They didn't care. They still kicked me out. They did not give me any Benadryl or prednisone, which is my standard regimen that I get in these flares, even though I had given it to me in the past. They were just heck bent on giving me absolutely nothing, did not care at all for my well-being. I almost died on the way home. It's only 4 minutes. My face was swelling. It was really, really scary because I was exposed to the air quality, and they have such since been completely callous. They don't really care. They don't care at all, not even a little bit. That they almost killed me. Patient relations is continuing to lie to me, and I've done everything that I'm supposed to do as a patient that received harm by said hospital. I know with Fairfax. I've done everything that I'm supposed to do by calling patient relations. Now they're avoiding my calls, so now I'm going to have to sneak and call them from another phone number just to force them to try to get an actual paper trail that I have complained about this because it's clear again that this is a well-oiled machine. They're used to knowing how to dodge, and I'm going to have to go through extenuating measures to get better. But the good side is, while it's very reminiscent of exactly 3 years ago when I had the same issue, the results are different. So because I'm on the Mount Sinai Patient Advisory Board, yep, we are doing work for the first time very urgently on changing the protocols for these post-COVID associated illnesses and other chronic illnesses, to change the protocol of how we're treated, to go and try to train more doctors, to give them kind of like a template and a guidance on how to treat us so this doesn't happen to anyone else again for the first time in history. So I'm super happy that we're finally seeing this as something urgent and we need to tackle like yesterday. And at the very least, it will be implemented in Mount Sinai. We're hoping that the other spaces will adopt it so that everyone around the country can finally not be terrified. It's so sad. We should be scared. We should not be scared to go to the ER. That should be our safe space. It's crazy. And so I'm excited about that. And there's some other things that are in the work tech-wise that I'm working on when it comes to tracking this, because there's nothing tracking all these incidents that we all with chronic illness are familiar is status quo. Yep. That's crazy. I am going to be pitching to the federal government a very special way that I've developed to capture and measure these incidences, because as you know, if we don't have the data, then they also are kind of like, oh, well, is it bad or is it a bad apple? No, it's systemic, it's nationwide, it's a problem. Yeah. So because there's no urgency for anyone else to create the way to track this, I'll just do it myself. Yeah. And that's what I'll be doing.
Which is fantastic, because something that never should have been political, that should have been medical, got in the way of the fact that depending on whose study you read, anywhere from 1 in 8 to 1 in 4 people who've contracted COVID is going to end up with some form of a long-term disability associated with having had that infection. And there's so many people out there that don't even realize that some of what they're experiencing could very well be related to having had COVID, because of the lack of education, the lack of tracking, the lack of data. So kudos to you for leading the charge and working with others and all of us who have really, have to stop sometimes. I mean, we met through the Long COVID Alliance, and there are times when, some of us are in meetings with oxygen on, but we're determined that this is not going to continue. We cannot allow this to continue in this country. And you're also on the board of the organization Solve.ME that hosts this multi-partner national/international alliance that is also patient-led to try and address these challenges. As I mentioned earlier, you've testified before Congress, you've participated in the development of legislation, and as important as this is, and as many symptoms as all of us have, because I also have mast cell activation syndrome and some other things, not everybody's even at the table, which is really frustrating when patients are seeking answers, and some of those answers lie with entities that won't even participate in the conversation. So to the extent that you can, because I did reach out to one organization and did not hear back, not even a no comment. So, but I'm curious to get some of your thoughts around that. These organizations, one that claim that they're there for patients, but clearly can't put their egos or whatever aside to get involved in the conversation. But the other is all of these entities that are now out there chasing federal dollars so they can get monies to call themselves long COVID clinics that aren't really there for the patients either.
Yeah, it's really hurtful, actually. Most people that follow my journey know that I always talk about the myalgic encephalomyelitis chronic fatigue syndrome, also known as MECFS community, that found me after that first Washington Post article that featured my illness. And they did everything they could. They searched hard for me on all social medias to say, hey, I think that you have MECFS. Hey, I think you have MCAS as well. In this autonomia, and they really helped me in my recovery. Without them, I would not be walking today. Without them, my son would not be as well as he is today. They've helped me tirelessly for hours, put names to my symptoms, because if you can't even name your symptom, how are you going to even go to your doctor and ask for treatment when you can't even properly describe it? And they really helped me walk through the SSI. Filing, they helped a lot of us. They would just have little groups meetings and just tell us, hey, this is what you should do. Go talk to your doctor about this. This is what sounds like you should have. And they also helped us on that emotional support space. And they were so proactive. Dysautonomia International and the other dysautonomia groups were involved early on. There's a few line groups that were popping into our groups to give us some information. But I noticed that the mast cell activation syndrome groups can't find hide nor hair of them 3 years in. They're still not there. And it was disappointing to me as a person who almost starved to death and I was almost died in the ER that they even have an ER guide. They have an ER guide. They have a step-by-step thing that shows me, hey, you can actually develop a protocol with your allergist, an ER protocol with your allergist, so that the ER is forced to give you this standard of care. Had I known this early on, I would have not almost died. If they had really been proactive, even recently, like I could have died from that ER trip just 2 weeks ago, or the ER trip from an allergic reaction six months ago. So to see that they've been around for several years pre-COVID, and they have an abundance of resources that could have steered my trajectory and avoided my harm. But then I also could have been able to tell the other patients too that are new and coming down the pipeline of these things. And so that they continue to operate and be the only group of like associated illnesses not really participating in physician education, in patient education. It's so it hurts me. It hurts me. I shouldn't have to learn from another advocates from another illness how to do that when they know best. They know it in and out. They could have been helping me already learn more about it. So when I go with those research teams, I can help the research teams know better about that and build out better comprehensive studies and better comprehensive therapies a long time ago. And at this point, we're 3 years in, there's no excuse why they're not here other than they just don't want to be here to do the work. It just,
yeah.
It's just heartbreaking. Like there's so much suffering. I would never, even if it's just me and my one organization, I would have also been hunting down every freaking patient that I knew the second that we got into this pandemic, because this is not new. Post-viral illness isn't new. Yep. We know that from every virus, a subset that will develop mast cell activation syndrome. We know from every virus, a subset will develop myalgic encephalomyelitis, chronic fatigue syndrome. We know from every virus a certain subset will develop dysautonomia, hence why those other groups were there. And so I'm really sad about it. It didn't have to be this way. I hope they change their ways, but until then the other illnesses are going to have to continue to do the heavy lifting. But like there's no reason why I shouldn't be able to have that very good detailed paper with me that first ER trip, or at the very least the one where I got kicked out at and when I was dying of starvation trying to figure out what was wrong with me. You just Google person allergic to all food, you know what's going to pop up? MCAS. So like it's and that's how I had to find out. That's how I had to really find out and really be sure, like to even go down that. I said I had to Google it. But if it had been the support groups early on proactively, I would have already known and seen it and recognized it and asked my doctor earlier and avoided ER trips altogether.
Right.
So
believe it or not, we're at time, but audience, never fear, because we are going to do a part 2 with an extraordinary young leader joining with Cynthia. I so really cannot wait for you all to meet Aiden. He's coming up in our next episode. And please believe me when I say you do not want to miss what him or any of the other guests that we have in the future may have to say. Cynthia, what is the best way for people to connect with you?
I'm actually a very accessible person. You can find me at my first and last name on any social media. It's a very unique name, which is fantastic, Cynthia Adinig. I respond to every, and I do mean every, patient request for help regardless of where you are in the world, whatever it is that your illness is. I've also discovered that I am really good with other illnesses. It doesn't have to be long COVID, since COVID covers the whole body. I have some insights on a lot of things. But also you can check out the website, BIPOCEquityAgency.com, and go to contact and contact me there, or CynthiaAdinig.com. Like I said, I prioritize patient contacts over anyone else, and I'm available 24 hours a day.
Fantastic. So please look her up and join us for our next episode, where we're going to be joined by Aiden and talk more about this, as well as Aiden's leadership in this area as a child who is long COVID, which is something a lot of people don't even realize is possible. So, but as we wrap up this episode, you have so many viewing choices these days, so thank you very much for watching our show, and please tell a friend or colleague about us. And as a reminder, What the Why airs on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and Mondays at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on RVNTelevision.com, as well as Roku, and coming soon to other platforms. And also, please remember, whether you're looking to make changes in your life, big or small, join us again for more informative, fascinating, advocacy-related organizations with leaders such as Cynthia, who decided that the status quo just wasn't significant or sufficient, and overcame whatever obstacles or challenges laid in their path to find their purpose and to live it.